I've had a couple conversations in the last couple months with friends who are both in a similar predicament. They both have the opportunity, maybe even the expectation to take a personal retreat day, and they both feel stuck for a few related reasons. For one of them, he just doesn't know how he would spend that time. If he had an entire day to take a personal retreat day, he's not sure what he would do at the time. For the other one, he wants to do it. He thinks it would be valuable, but it just keeps seeming like other things fill up his calendar that seem more important. Maybe you can relate to both of those. Maybe you've heard about the idea of a personal retreat day. Maybe you've watched other videos about it or heard a friend talk about it and you think, I think I would like to do some kind of personal retreat day, but you're not sure where to start. And so that's what this video is about today is I want to talk a little bit about how to do the planning for a personal retreat day. And some of this might seem really straightforward and really simple, but what I've found is if you can answer in advance the more specific questions, the more specific you can make your plans to be, the more likely you are to follow through. So I just want to give you 6 simple questions today to ask yourself about planning a personal retreat day, all the way from the very initial plans, however far into the future you need to look, to how you might spend that time on that day. My name is John Chandler, and I talk a lot about what are practical habits, what are practical tools to live a meaningful life. And of course, I think a personal retreat day for any of us can be a meaningful way of living. Now, I suppose before we start talking about the specific questions about how to plan the day, let's make sure we're talking about the same thing when I talk about a personal retreat day. It's a pretty straightforward idea, but I thought I would just try to summarize what I have in mind to describe this. So, a personal retreat day is really just a day to step away from your responsibilities to get perspective on your life. Get perspective on where you've come from, where you're going. All right. So understanding that, what a personal retreat day is, let's talk about the 6 questions. As you put definition to these, as you bring clarity to these questions, that's when you can start to make sure you have a solid plan that you won't chuck out the door at the last minute. So the first question to ask is, who do you need to include in your plans? Who are the people who are going to be impacted by you taking a day away from your responsibilities? It might be your spouse or your partner. It might just be that they need to understand that you've got this day designated where you're not going to be available. You're going to leave the house or leave your apartment early in the morning and you won't be back until late at night. And they just understand that because you want to get them on board. It might be that you have to talk to your boss about it if it's not already an expectation. It might be that you have to talk to your peers, or it might be that you have to talk to the people who you work over to say, I have this day planned. It's very important to me. I need to protect this time. Here's how my responsibilities need to be doled out for that day, if you need to get into that level of detail. And you might even want to say, here are the handful of things, that would be okay to reach out to me and contact me. But otherwise, please honor my space during this day as I'm taking a day to not focus on my responsibilities. And can you partner with me in that? So the first question is, who do you need to include in your plans and get them on board so they can be supportive and help you help you protect the planning of that day. The next question, again, really straightforward. When will you go? But until you actually etch out the date on the calendar, until you block it out so that nothing else can be planned, it's just a good idea. And so it might mean that you have to look a month down the road. It might mean, depending on your responsibilities, you might have to look 4 months down the road. But get it put on the calendar and commit to yourself that this is the day that I'm going to take this personal retreat, and block it out. Don't allow anything else to be scheduled. Again, the reason we've already talked about who you need to tell is you need to be telling them now, this is the day I've planned, so that they can be planning around that too. So who do you need to include in your plans? When will you go? Get it set and lock it out. And then another question is, where will you go? And this is a fun question for me because I live in Arizona, and where I will go definitely depends on the time of year. We have great opportunities in the summer months to get out of the heat and to go up mountains in Arizona. It's not just all saguaro cactus and desert. We have some beautiful mountains with some beautiful streams that you can go and sit by when it's 110 degrees in the Phoenix area. And so sometimes in the summer, I love to just take a personal retreat day by heading up that way. But in the winter months, there's actually some great hiking that can be done right outside the valley in, some nice desert hiking that's perfect weather for it. And I often try to get out in nature when I do my own personal retreat days because I I like the perspective that comes from being completely apart from any of my normal day to day stuff. And sometimes even that means not having to have my phone buzzing or anything like that. But sometimes for me, I also like to do personal retreat days just by going to a coffee shop. I have one specific coffee shop that's about a half an hour from my house that I never go to, except for if I'm doing a personal retreat day that's going to be more of like in a coffee shop setting. Because in my mind, I just want to identify that that coffee shop is where I go when I'm having a planning retreat. I do planning retreats about once a month where I can go and I can sit and I can look at how have I lost track of my priorities? What do I need to prioritize for this coming month? And so I always do those in that particular coffee shop. It's one where I have run into people I know who recognize me, but it doesn't happen often. You might want to do the same thing. You might want to go to a coffee shop. You might want to get out in nature. You might have the opportunity to do a 24-hour retreat where you go and you get an Airbnb, or you go and you even just get a hotel room. You just have a little more focus that even comes with something like that. But where will you go? Next question to ask is, what will you need? Okay. Again, these are simple questions, right? But you want to plan these things in advance so that there's as little disruption as possible on that day. If you're going to go hiking, make plans to bring the things you would normally want to bring if you were hiking. Make sure that you have a rain jacket, make sure that you have plenty of water, make sure that you have the food that you need, make sure that you have the journal that you want to write in. But don't bring more than you need. Just bring the things that you need to experience that day of stepping away from responsibility as much as possible. When I do my coffee shop planning day, I don't bring my laptop, which has everything on it. I bring my iPad because the kind of thinking and reflection and planning that I want to do on that day, I can do on the iPad. And so I make sure I bring the right tools for that day. When I'm going to do that planning retreat that's even just at a coffee shop, I decide in advance where I'm going to go, if I'm going to take a break and go get lunch. It's really easy to be focused on doing some kind of retreating/planning kind of work and then go, I'm starting to get hungry. Where am I going to go? And the next thing I know, I've been on Yelp for 45 minutes. I try to plan all of that in advance. So my brain cycles aren't thinking about any of that while I'm on the personal retreat. Okay. So what will you need in terms of what food you will need or what directions you will need, any of that kind of stuff, try to get that in advance. Okay, so let's get into a little bit bigger questions for these last two. Okay. Next bigger question is, why are you doing this? Now, generally, a personal retreat day is to withdraw from responsibilities for a day, like we said, but there's also might be a more concise why of what you hope to get out of it. You might just need a day to not be having to make decisions or having to answer questions from so many people who you are responsible to. Right. So you might just need rest. And that's a great way to spend a personal retreat day, especially if you're going to do something like a hike or something like that. It just kind of is a reboot for your brain and gives you a whole new perspective when you get back to things. So it might just be a day where you're resting and you're not thinking about anything. It might be a day where it's reflection. It might be a day where you need to go, especially if you're taking this in the context of your job, where it might just be a day of reflection, of looking back and asking yourself, how have I been fulfilling my responsibilities? How well have I been fulfilling the expectations that are set on me? How well have I been fulfilling my role? And where have I lost track? Where have I not done the things that I actually do think are important for my job? And how can I do a reset? What are the things that I need to stop doing? What are the things that I need to spend more time on? And by looking back and reflecting, you can answer some of those kind of questions. But it also might be that a personal retreat day is all about looking forward. It is all about inspiration. Maybe you're getting ready for a new project, or maybe you're getting ready for a new season, and you need to figure out what's it going to take for you to engage with whatever this new project is, this new work is that needs to be done. And so it might be a day just of doing a little bit of reading about whatever that project might be. It might be a day of just hammering out plans and mind mapping and getting everything down so that you can kind of empty your brain and think about it. Again, because you're out of the day to day, you can think of the bigger picture. And so it might be a day of planning. I personally, though, will tell you that I don't think a personal retreat day is best for decision making. And there are some that might work really well for, but I think decision making happens through process And if we step away for a day because we have such and such big decision to make, whether it is related specifically to some project we have going on or something like that, or whether it's a career change, I don't think you want to put that kind of pressure on yourself to say, I'm going to be away for 8 hours. And in that 8 hours, I'm going to come to clarity about such and such. Now, some of the reflection that we talked about, some of the looking forward that we talked about might be good tools to take stock of where you are and to take stock of the state of your mind and take stock of the state of your heart about some decision that needs to be made. But don't put some kind of pressure on yourself to have clarity about some kind of decision in a single day of a personal retreat. I don't think you can do it. And then the last question is simply, how will you make the most of this time? It's good to have a plan. How will you make the most of this time? And if it's going to be a day that is just purely rest, of course, then don't plan anything. Don't feel like you have to fill that time. But oftentimes we feel like we want to fill that time. I read a lot, but I'm one of those, because I read a lot and I have personal reading goals and all that, I'm terrible at actually doing little reflection exercises and stuff like that that books prescribe sometime. Like, hey, now pause here at the end of this chapter and work. I just don't do it because I'm like, no, I got to finish this book and get on to the next book. But what I do is I have a note that I keep that it just, if there's some kind of exercise that's in a book that I think this is worth more time, this is worth returning to, then I'll just put down in that note, such and such book. It might be the book overall has some exercises or a specific chapter, or it might be that you just have some kind of guide. I am a spiritual director, and I often, have talked to people who've taken a personal spiritual retreat and they have some kind of prayer guide or something like that. On my spiritual direction website, I'll include the link to this. I actually have a link to a spiritual retreat day. And so if it's that kind of retreat, a prayer retreat, sometimes you can find some kind of written guide that can help you with that. But plan ahead and think through what are the things that I want to reflect on? What are the things that I want to work my way through in this day? These are straightforward questions to answer, but the work of going on a personal retreat day happens from when you very first plan it. And when you put all this in line and you answer all these questions for yourself, on the other side of that retreat, you'll be so glad that you did. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of this video. I would love to say, hey, go watch this video or go watch this video, but I'm actually just at a place where I'm starting to do some public videos. So I hope you'll subscribe, because I imagine having more videos like this coming in the near future. I have a big stack of ideas that I would love to share with you. Thanks for watching.